It's a beautiful sunny day in the city, and in the hospital, a young woman named Addison greets a doctor, Dr. Morgan, asking him about his vacation plans. She works with him as his assistant, and the two seem to be on friendly terms. He begrudgingly admits that he should already be on his way, but as usual, work has gotten in the way. The kind-hearted Addison reprimands him for never taking time for himself and shoos him out of the hospital, letting him know she'll take over the rest. She takes a seat and then calls her brother's receptionist, asking her to remind him not to be late for their lunch date. In a skyscraper downtown, her brother Pete is hurriedly making his way through the reception carrying several large bags. A woman hands him a thick folder just as he gets a text from his boss, Justin, demanding he go to his office right away. He rushes up quickly, carrying his boss's dry cleaning, and enters the beautiful grand office in the middle of a quarterly meeting. Justin rudely interrogates him about the time it took to get there, then cuts him off when he tries to explain. It seems as though poor Pete doesn't have a great work life. Justin turns to his directors and reveals that he's found someone with a new patent for a battery design that could be the key to doubling the sales for their company. However, the person who owns it, Catherine Sawyer, doesn't know the value of what she's got. Her company is currently in financial trouble, so he's hoping to get in and buy it out from under her for a low value before his competitors catch on to the prospect. He's a very savvy businessman, but someone who won't hesitate to step on others to get what he wants. He even speaks down to the other directors in the room, just like he did to poor Pete. Justin turns back to him, instructing him to find out where the woman with the patent has gone on holiday, and asking him to make dinner reservations before dismissing him. Pete heads back to his desk and makes the call to try and find out where Catherine Sawyer is staying. Meanwhile, his receptionist approaches to remind him about lunch with his sister. He grimaces and quickly heads across town on his electric scooter to meet Addison in the park. She anticipated both his lateness and his inability to stop and buy his lunch, so she brought him a sandwich, for which he's very grateful. Pete vents to her about his boss and his terrible job. When Addison advises him to drop it and go back to school to finish his master's degree, he rejects the idea, claiming that he's worked too hard to get to where he is, working directly with the billionaire Justin Ross. If he gives it up now, it'll all have been for nothing. If he can hold out a bit longer, he can apply for something else in the company, and Justin won't be able to refuse him. Addison is doubtful, knowing Justin's nature, but tries to be supportive. Right on cue, Pete receives a text and has to head out. Addison laughs at their 3-minute lunch, but Pete just shrugs apologetically. He can't help it, if he's needed he has to go. He jumps back on his scooter, but as he's riding along he receives another message, and when he checks his phone he looks away from the road for a second. A man on a bicycle is coming along the intersection. Just as Pete looks up and yells in alarm, unable to stop in time, and the two of them collide with a crunch. In the next scene, Addison is heading out of the hospital with her brother, who's in a wheelchair with his leg up in a cast. He's insisting he has to get back to work immediately, because Justin is texting him angrily asking where he is. She's exasperated at him, because he can't even walk, but he refuses to go home and rest until he's been given permission. So reluctantly she drives him back to his office, insisting on going inside with him to make sure he gets sent home. On the way up to Justin's office, Pete receives a call back from the woman at Catherine Sawyer's company, who's found the address of her resort. He fist pumps the air in relief, happy that he was able to come through for his boss and get the location. As he hangs up, though, Justin emerges, annoyed at the noise of Pete on his crutches. His irritation quickly evaporates when Pete gives him the information he wanted, that Catherine is currently staying on the island of St. Martin. He orders Pete to clear his schedule and get him booked to fly out the very next day. Pete scrabbles to get to the phone, and Justin finally notices the cast on his leg. But rather than being sympathetic, he just tells him he won't be accompanying him on the trip because he'll be a liability. He'll take someone called Duncan instead. Pete tries to profess his willingness to go, despite Addison rolling her eyes, but Justin shuts the door in his face. The pair head down to reception, where a dejected Pete asks for Duncan. Addison is sympathetic, since she knows Duncan is a lazy and manipulative person who's been after Pete's job for a long time. Pete's very concerned that if he lets Duncan take this opportunity away from him, he'll lose everything he's worked for. Addison can't fathom how difficult the corporate world must be, and feels awful, but doesn't know how to help. Pete suddenly has a brainwave, though, and heads back upstairs, warning Addison just to roll with what he says. In Justin's office, Pete makes a profound speech about how Duncan is only going to let him down. Justin is aware of Duncan's deficiencies, but knows that Pete is also incapable of doing the job right now. Pete convinces him to bring Addison along with them. He'll be the brains that Justin needs, keeping the appointments going and making sure everything runs smoothly from the house. Addison will go out with Justin, fetching and bringing things he needs and ensuring he's taken care of. It works perfectly since Dr. Morgan is out of town for 2 weeks and she'll have the time off. Justin is extremely doubtful, but he sees Pete's desperation and decides to take a chance on the idea, warning him that if it goes south, he'll fire him. Pete has the ultimate faith in his sister, though, despite her protestations, and agrees. As they head out of the office, Addison reprimands Pete for his recklessness. She doesn't want to be dragged into this ruthless world he's found himself in, and more to the point, he should be getting rest. He pleads with her, though, because now his job relies on her coming along, and reluctantly she is forced to agree. On Justin's private plane on the way out, she's ensuring Pete is well taken care of, and the billionaire is already getting exasperated with her fussing over her brother. He recommends she read his best-selling novel, a combined memoir and business philosophy, and she asks him if it's any good. He gives her a hard stare, while Pete freezes in shock that she dared to ask such a question. She shrugs, though, and begins to read it. They soon arrive on the beautiful Caribbean island of St. Martin. The sun is shining and the wind is rustling through the palm trees as they pull up to Justin's private villa, on top of a hill overlooking the sea. Addison can't hold back her awe at the luxury, but Justin sternly reminds her it isn't a vacation. Things aren't off to a great start. Inside, Justin instructs the driver to leave him the keys and asks Pete to organize dinner for 7 p.m., then leaves the siblings to their own devices to get set up and figure out where everything is. Addison drops Pete off in his room, then sets out to find her own and explore the villa a little. It's stunningly beautiful and she's spoiled for choice. She picks a room off the main courtyard and is about to get to unpacking when Justin appears, informing her it's his room. Mortified, Addison apologizes, but he doesn't seem to care, shrugging and instructing her to unpack his things since she's there anyway. He grabs his laptop and then goes for a swim in the infinity pool while Addison reluctantly follows his instructions. Later, Pete heads into the kitchen, having just woken up and panicking that Justin needs help. Addison reassures him that everything's fine and she's getting dinner ready as ordered. Pete's surprised because he usually just orders in with the company card, but his sister didn't know that was an option, so she's been busy making something. She's already annoyed at Justin's lack of appreciation for anything they do for him. Pete is jaded and explains that that's just how Justin is. Addison is frustrated on her brother's behalf, since he's been working with him for so long and still never gets a hint of gratitude. Pete assures her it'll get better, but she has to wonder if it ever will. She goes to fetch Justin out of the pool to have his dinner. She set 3 plates on the table for all of them, but when he sits down, acknowledging the food with a grunt, he dismisses them. Addison dutifully picks up the plates, and she and Pete head outside to eat by the pool instead. Pete once again tries to explain that Justin just doesn't see them as equals, or anything other than tools, really. Addison compares it to her job with Dr. Morgan and Pete laughs, as Dr. Morgan is a decent person, to put it lightly. Addison still can't get used to this cutthroat corporate attitude, but she's determined to stick it out for her brother's sake. He promises her he'll do as much as he can in terms of organization, but warns her that Justin will expect her to wait on him hand and foot throughout the day. The following morning she dresses, stopping pointedly to turn over Justin's book on her side table so she doesn't have to see his face, and heads out to meet the boys, who are already knee-deep in business affairs. Pete is taking notes and is already ahead of the game in terms of sorting out the calls and meetings, but Justin needs Addison to help him set up a natural meeting between himself and Catherine. Intrigued, she asks further, but he doesn't elaborate, only adding that there are some difficulties between them from a few years back, so she won't accept a meeting. It's going to have to be a casual setup. Pete hands her the address, but Addison is confused as to what she's supposed to do. She makes her way over to the place and finds out that Catherine is staying on a yacht that is due into the harbor the following day. Justin informs Addison upon her return that they'll be golfing. At the tee, he's waiting for his partner to show up and she's amazed that someone would fly out just to play with him. His arrogance shines through in his response, as he asks her if she even knows who he is. Luckily, she doesn't get a chance to reply as the man he's meeting arrives and they get into 2 golf carts. Justin calls out to Addison to keep up as they drive off. At the end of the game, Addison remarks that Justin is a much better golfer than the other man, and he informs her that if he'd wanted the business deal, he would have let the guy win. But as is, he decided just to go all out and crush him. He asks how she got on with Catherine, and upon hearing she won't arrive until the following day, he makes a jab at Pete for getting the timing wrong. Addison defends her brother, causing Justin to round on her aggressively for daring to question him. At the villa, she's reading the book he gave her despite herself, and is irritated when Justin walks past and spots her in the act. He finds her in the kitchen later on, goading her about reading it, causing her to fire back with a sarcastic remark. He pauses, as that's now twice in one day, but decides to let it slide again. It piques his interest that there's someone who doesn't just fall over themselves to please him. He simply instructs Addison to get a meeting with Catherine set up by the end of the following day. At the dock later, Addison spies on Catherine as she heads off her yacht with her daughter. She smiles as the woman promises they'll do plenty of fun things on their vacation. Catherine's assistant chimes in with the place and time of their dinner reservation, exactly the information Addison needed. When she tells Justin, he instructs Pete to get them a reservation as well, but quickly realizes he can't bring him along in his cast. He suggests Addison come along and pretend to be his date, to help in initiating a casual conversation with Catherine. She has to go into town and buy herself a dress, though, because the clothes she's brought won't be good enough for a woman he'd take out. Disgusted, but resigned, Addison does as she's told. Pete reassures her while they're shopping for an outfit that Justin doesn't have a bad reputation with women, and he's unlikely to try anything with her. This is all for Catherine's benefit. Addison still isn't thrilled at the prospect, but she loves her brother, so she tries to think about what the success of this trip means for him. They show up at the restaurant and Ross instructs Addison to laugh as Catherine comes in. However, the natural meeting is as frosty as can be. Catherine is not thrilled to see him and quickly asks the waitress to move their table to the other side of the restaurant. Justin sighs in annoyance. Addison spies Catherine as she goes to the bar and takes the opportunity to think on her feet. Catherine's ordered a Shirley Temple for her daughter, so Addison gets one as well, and the two quickly get to chatting. Addison keeps up the charade that she's dating Justin but manages to ingratiate herself with Catherine, as the other woman warns her about his character. Taking pity on her, Catherine invites her to a picnic with her family the following day, and Addison accepts, delighted both to spend some time away from Justin and to help Pete out by getting closer to Catherine. When she returns to her table, Justin's impressed at her having secured a lunch, but not pleased that she'll be going alone. She promises to smooth things over, then upon seeing he's ordered her a salad, swaps their plates over and starts eating his dinner. He's astonished. When they arrive back at the villa, Justin inquires whether she's afraid of him, and is curious to learn that Addison doesn't think she has any reason to be. She remarks on how he treats people who he sees as being beneath him, then heads inside, leaving him ruminating on her words. She finds Pete later, who gives her the full lowdown on what happened between Justin and Catherine in the past. He bought out her company, convincing her to sign by making promises about the direction he would take it in, but then dismantled the entire outfit, losing hundreds of people their jobs. He just wanted to take out a competitor. The press jumped on the deal, but he spun it to make Catherine look like the bad guy, and she was ousted for it and lost everything. Currently, she's been hired by a company that is going under, and the outlook for it isn't good. Addison feels awful for her, and hates that she's been put in a position where she has to take advantage of such a person. Justin sees the two siblings conversing and watches Addison with a curious smile. The next day, Addison heads down to the beach and meets Catherine's daughter, Annie, giving her an origami bird she made. When Annie heads into the water, Catherine inquires about Addison's life, and she opens up about her job at the hospital and her brother's broken leg, unfolding the story of how she ended up on St. Martin. She spills to Catherine that she's not romantically involved with Justin, she's just here to help her brother, but withholds the reason why Justin is there. Catherine meanders into talking about herself and the past, and reveals that she'll never trust Justin again after what happened the last time. Her career was almost ruined because of him. Addison sympathizes, but just as she's trying to talk up Justin a little, the man himself appears, ruining any hint of a good mood. He asks whether Catherine wants to go jet skiing with them, and she not so politely declines. The pair head down the beach and Justin grills Addison about her progress, but she strongly reprimands him for showing up, because it's not going to make Catherine any more amicable towards her. Justin's frustrated at the slow progress, and Addison has to bring up the past to make him eventually accept what she's saying. She changes the topic, asking if he intends to go jet skiing, but it turns out he said it just to try and seem fun and relatable in front of Catherine. Addison brings up his book, in which he makes himself out to be a thrill seeker, but he tells her he's not allowed to do anything like that anymore, because it makes his investors nervous. Rolling her eyes, she prods at him, asking who he is beneath all the business talk. Nowhere in the book does it talk about his childhood or his story. He gives her an anecdote about when he was little and he used to collect golf balls from the course to sell for lunch money. She loves the story and asks him why he didn't include it, but he steers the conversation away from himself, uncomfortable, and refocuses on Catherine. Addison shuts him down again, though, because he doesn't seem to understand that Catherine doesn't trust him. He protests that he only did what he had to do. There was a lot more attention on him than anyone realized, and he made the best decision he could have made in the circumstances. Addison isn't buying it and challenges his dog-eat-dog attitude, leaving him at a loss. That night at the villa, Justin stops Addison as she's about to go to bed and praises her for her work. She's startled to hear it, but it's followed immediately by another jab at Pete. She steps into the room determinedly, accusing Justin of bullying her brother and demanding that he stop. Justin is unrelenting, though, and maintains his attitude towards Pete's performance despite Addison trying to appeal to his conscience. Justin doesn't care, reminding her that her brother is paid well for what he does, and gets to come to places like St. Martin. She argues that it's not exactly a vacation for either of them, and Justin admits that he's been asking her to do some outrageous things, like cooking for him, unpacking his things, and washing his dishes, just to see if she would do them. Fuming, she storms out, having had enough of his entitled attitude. Pete reprimands her for speaking up, afraid of the repercussions it might have for him. Addison firmly believes, though, that hiding in Justin's shadow and hoping for appreciation is not going to work out for him, and he needs to start validating his worth. The following morning, she's surprised to come across Justin cooking, and he even asks her how he likes her eggs. She isn't aware he even knew how to cook, let alone that he would cook for others. That is, until he points out snarkily that he's just trying to prove her wrong about how badly he treats people. She's surprised he even listened to her comments. He gives her a full brief for the day's work. When Addison points out that it's a weekend and perhaps he should take the day off, he accuses her of just wanting the day off herself. He hasn't had a weekend in years. Justin surprises Pete later that day by informing him that the two of them can have the rest of the day to themselves. It seems he's taken Addison's advice. Pete doesn't know what to say, shocked, and hurries away before his boss can change his mind. As they're leaving, Addison goes back because she's left her wallet behind. She runs into Justin, and seeing that he's at a loss for what to do with his afternoon, she takes pity on him and offers for him to join them out on the beach, where they're going to watch a plane land. After a moment of hesitation, he accepts. Pete is grumpy that she invited him along, but Justin is surprisingly mild and doesn't ask for anything. Addison leaves Pete with the bags and the sunscreen, given he can't swim with his broken leg, and heads out into the water as Justin goes off to explore on his own. She's sitting on a rock in the water when Justin finds her later. He joins her and they chat a little, Justin opening up for the first time and seeming interested in what Addison has to say. She asks him where he feels at home, and he teases her for not having finished the book yet. As they walk along the beach together, she comments that the version of himself Justin projects in the book are different from the one she's seen in the last week. He challenges her to explain, and becomes increasingly affected when she can't find anything nice to say about him. He admits that her opinion matters to him, something she hadn't even thought about. Before she can take a moment to reply, the plane they came to see flies overhead, and they gasp in excitement at seeing the spectacle. As they're trudging back up the beach, they have a chance encounter with Catherine and Annie. Annie laments that the origami swan is getting weathered, and Addison promises her she'll make another one. Justin invites Catherine and her family to his villa, but she pointedly refuses, so Addison suggests snorkeling the following day. At her daughter's insistence, Catherine reluctantly agrees to join them, although it's clear she isn't happy about it. At the villa, Addison admits she doesn't feel comfortable manipulating Catherine, and Pete begs her to think of it more like peacekeeping than manipulation. Justin joins the conversation, agreeing with her brother and praising Addison's good work in making Catherine amenable to an outing. She warns him that being his usual self around Catherine won't work if he wants to talk business. He'll need to adjust his attitude. She recalls the golf ball story and suggests he acts more like that, because Catherine will appreciate that approach. He bites back with sarcasm, but it's clear he's unsure how to proceed without the arrogant billionaire mask to protect himself. Pete comes to find Addison and comments on the peculiar interaction. He's been working with his boss for years and has never seen him ask for help, or even anyone else's opinion before. He's been observing Justin's interactions with Addison and is concerned that his sister is having so much influence over the man. He's convinced there isn't any more to him than the overbearing boss he knows, and if Addison tries too hard to see the good in him, she's going to get her heart broken. Startled that Pete's seeing something between them, Addison vehemently denies it and promises her brother there's nothing to worry about. The following day, Addison is on a call when she's supposed to take Pete to the local doctor to get his cast changed. Justin offers to take him instead, since she's busy, surprising them both. On the ride, Pete is very uncomfortable. It's clear that although they've worked together for a long time, they've never spent any actual time together. Justin tentatively asks him about how the accident happened, trying to break the ice, and remembering Addison's accusation that he doesn't care about Pete. When Pete explains, the two end up laughing at the absurdity of it all. For the first time, Pete begins to believe that Justin might be a human. Addison and Justin are waiting on the boat for their snorkeling trip, but Catherine and Annie are nowhere to be seen. Justin expected that they might stand him up, so he's not too disappointed. The pair sit in the boat, sharing a drink and chatting while they wait. He reveals to Addison why he's so interested in Catherine's company, and asks her about her life working for Dr. Morgan. He seems genuinely intrigued about her comparatively normal job, and is surprised she doesn't have any higher ambition, given her capability. She doesn't see her job as the highlight of her life, though, and Justin is taken aback at her relaxed outlook. It's not something he's ever experienced before. Just then, Catherine and Annie finally arrive, and the group sets out. The snorkeling expedition is very successful, and Annie excitedly points out some turtles, wanting to follow them. Addison offers to watch her while Catherine goes to fetch her camera. Upon her arrival at the boat, Justin meets her and asks her to talk for a moment. He apologizes for the way he treated the deal in the past and admits that he was callous and unfair. She's surprised at his change of attitude, but willing to at least hear him out, despite it all. He asks her what she wants to do with the company, shocking her even more, since last time he didn't care what she wanted at all. By the end of the trip, Justin happily tells Addison that Catherine's promised to look over his proposals, as he's going to be including her ideas in the deal this time. He thanks her for her help, attributing it all to her intervention. Addison, though, is sure it's because he took her advice and was acting like the humble person who grew up like everyone else, and worked hard for his money, not the arrogant billionaire he's become. He questions tentatively whether she likes that man, and she finds herself admitting that she does. A moment passes between them where it's hard to deny the romantic tension in the air. Justin quickly steps away, though, scared of what it might mean. The men are working later on when Justin asks Pete about what Addison likes. He's utterly bemused by the question and finds her later to ask what's going on. He repeats that his boss has been acting very strangely the last few days and questions once again whether there's anything between them. This time, Addison doesn't deny it, having felt the chemistry there. Pete's bewildered that she sees anything in Justin, impressing upon her that he's a terrible person. But Addison is willing to believe in the Justin she's come to know on the trip. She suggests that the reason he's so difficult to deal with is because of the outside pressure on him. Pete isn't sure, but knows his sister won't listen. He can see she's already falling for him. At breakfast the next day, Justin asks Addison to go horse riding with him. Pete chokes on his food, because Catherine asked to meet Justin to discuss the proposal, but the tycoon wants to go on a date instead. The pair chat as they walk down the deserted beach with the horses. Justin finally admits to Addison that he's intrigued by her because there's rarely anyone he interacts with who's not trying to get something out of him. She came to the island because she wanted to help her brother, and she never cared what Justin thought of her, or hesitated to make her opinion known. It's why he likes her, because he's different around her. Better. Her breath catches at that admission, but just as the two are about to kiss, a horse whinnies, startling them into laughter. Back at the villa, Pete meets up with them and Justin heads off to his room. Addison asks him how it's going with organizing the deal with Catherine, and he comments offhandedly that it's good. But there are a lot of moving parts as Justin has him figuring out buyers on the other end. Addison is confused, because she thought Justin was going to listen to Catherine's ideas, but Pete shakes his head nonchalantly. It's not what his boss does, he just promises he will, and then does whatever he wants anyway. He's done it before. Addison follows her brother, upset at hearing that the man she thought she'd fallen for might not be the person she thought after all. Catherine arrives for the meeting at the villa, and Justin ensures Addison is present, since she and Catherine are friendly. The businesswoman doesn't give any ground, unwilling to be tricked into another bad deal, and internally Addison is happy to hear it. After the meeting, Addison remarks that Catherine wasn't listening to him because he slipped back into his arrogant businessman persona. He cuts her off, annoyed that it didn't go well, and she's hurt by his sudden sharpness. The following day a news story breaks online about Justin and Catherine's meeting, and it's revealed that Catherine has confirmed to the press she has no intention of selling. Justin is furious because it means that now, his competition will be aware of his attempt to buy her company, and he's lost his edge. He orders them immediately back to New York. On the plane, Addison tries to make him see reason, to hear out Catherine's ideas, but his panic has turned him straight back into corporate Justin once again, and he refuses to listen to her, fully in crisis management mode. At the board meeting, he comes up with a strategy to manage the PR fallout which involves threatening the competition. When Addison speaks up for herself and offers an alternative opinion, he shuts her down, humiliating her in front of the entire board. The board agrees that he needs to head back to St. Martin immediately in case Catherine approaches him after her other options turn her down. On the jet, Justin's on the phone when Pete comes over to comfort Addison, promising his boss didn't mean his harsh words. She points out the irony of him defending the man when he's been the one complaining about him for so long. But Pete just shrugs, wanting his sister to feel better. He admits that this is what he was afraid of, once it gets down to it. Justin always returns to being the same person he's always been. He can't get rid of that ruthless corporate personality. Addison sighs, as she thought he'd mellowed out, but she has to admit when she's wrong. She resolves to get through the next few frantic days just focusing on working with him, and then when it's all over, she'll return to her normal job and never have to see him again. Addison finishes reading Justin's book at the villa when he approaches her apologetically. He is contrite about his behavior, but tries to make her see that there are certain realities he has to deal with, bottom lines he can't ignore, and that's why his world is so harsh. She accepts his apology but makes it clear that she has no interest in pursuing anything romantically with him anymore, after seeing his true colors. In town, she encounters Catherine, who apologizes that things didn't work out. Addison waves it away, glad that Catherine's doing what's right for her and her company, but the other woman implies she didn't mean the business. Reminded once again of her heartbreak, Addison looks dejected, and Catherine offers to keep in touch when they're back in the city. Back at the villa, Pete convinces his sister to open up about her feelings for Justin. He can see that despite everything there's something real between them. Unbeknownst to her, Justin is listening to their conversation. She admits that Justin simply isn't who she hoped he would be, the person she saw behind the mask. Pete suggests she flies home as being around his boss isn't making her heartbreak any easier. He can handle the rest of the work. She promises to think about it. Justin stares over at them, troubled by her words and wondering how to fix things. That night, she brings him his dinner dutifully and leaves him alone at the table. Justin is momentarily frustrated, but soon enough Pete hobbles over on his crutches and asks if he can sit down. They have a heart-to-heart conversation for the first time, and Justin reveals he remembers all about Pete's ambition to move elsewhere in the company. He hasn't forgotten. He bitterly lets him know that his job is safe so he doesn't need to pretend to be loyal to him over his sister. Pete honestly remarks that he isn't, and offers his own opinion on the situation. That Justin doesn't necessarily have to be heartless to get ahead in business. There's a balance to be found between letting emotion cloud judgment and finding a compromise. Later that night, Justin is thinking about Pete's words and determinedly types out an email to Catherine. Addison finds Pete in the morning and decides to take him up on his offer to leave. Justin is out, so now will be the perfect time, before he can get back and throw a tantrum about it. Pete is sad to see her go but understands why she needs to. Meanwhile, Justin is meeting Catherine at a nearby restaurant. He finally asks her what she wants, and is frank with her when he says he knows how much trouble her company is in and that she can't save it alone. Realizing he's ready to talk about an actual partnership, Catherine allows him to speak. Afterward, Justin is searching for the siblings in the villa. He finds Pete and informs him about the deal, but his elation turns to sadness upon finding out that Addison has already departed. On the flight, Pete questions the logic behind the deal. Because Catherine's company is struggling and if it goes wrong, it could cost Justin millions. He surprises Pete by telling him he doesn't care. He's willing to let it fall apart, if that's what happens. He needed to make this deal to prove to himself, and to Addison, that he can still be the man she believed he was. He loves her and he doesn't want to give up because she makes him a better person. Pete is impressed that Justin cares enough about his sister to risk that much for her. Justin comes up with an idea for how to convince Addison of his feelings and asks Pete to teach him origami. Back in the city, Addison gets a text from Catherine informing her about the deal. She's pleased that the two agreed in the end. When she gets home to her apartment, she's shocked to find the entire place covered in flowers, and Justin standing amongst them holding a paper bouquet that he made himself. He tells her all about the deal and enthusiastically describes the new partnership, but recalls that the feeling he had at the villa when he realized she had already left hurt more than any business decision he could ever make. He wants to try to change, to become more like the person he is when he's around her. She calls him out and tells him what he needs to hear, even if he doesn't want her to. He hands her the paper bouquet, asking for another chance and showing her the multiple paper cuts on his fingers, and she giggles, won over by his thoughtfulness and his willingness to admit he was wrong. She admits there's a lot to like about him, despite his attitude, and she wants to give things a shot between them. The two share a romantic kiss to seal the deal.